Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Index podcast. My name is Matt Phelan, and I'm here with Chris Morse. How are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, Chris. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
So I'm Chris Morse. I am an employment partner at a law firm called Stephen Scone. I'm based down in Cornwall. The firm is Southwest focused. We are in Truro, Exeter, Taunton, and got a bolt hole in London as well. But I think more importantly than that, I'm a husband and I'm a father of three children.
Yep. How would you describe being a father of two children?
Challenging, but equally the most rewarding thing I have done and probably ever will do.
Yeah. I definitely second that. It's definitely put. Chris, normally I jump into the first question. I'm going to switch them around because we connected via your story of reflection in 2022, and I thought it would be a good place to start actually, and then lead into a happiness question. But can you take us back to 2022 and your period of reflection?
Yeah, so back in November 2022, I had a bit of a mental health crisis. It on reflection, it was something that was coming down the track for a long time, as these things often are. But through periods of denial and thinking, well, if I just work a little bit harder, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
I sort of convinced myself that it was all okay, and then along came a tipping point, which was pretty innocuous, as these things almost always are. And
Yeah.
I found myself going into a bit of a tailspin, and I took a few days off work, thinking, right, I'll rest for a few days, and that'll be fine. And I ended up being off for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And that is in itself a long time for reflection. But
Yeah.
I've continued to reflect in the time since, primarily with a hope of never getting back there again.
Yeah.
But also looking at that understanding and that importance of figuring out why it was you got there in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, I don't know whether you have an answer for this, but if someone's listening, right, and they're getting warning signs themselves, and they're feeling it, and as you described, you ignored it and thought you could work through it type stuff.
Yeah.
Have you got any advice for anyone that might be feeling that's listening now?
I think the two things that I would say are listen, as in listen to what your body is telling you. It's telling you that for a reason. And then talk. Doesn't matter who it's to, whether it's a trained professional, family member, a friend, whoever it is, just talk, because I think sometimes one of the things that gets lost the quickest is perspective in these situations. And actually, when you're able, the adage of a problem shared is a problem halved is a saying for a reason, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's really important to talk, and unfortunately, as men in particular, we're not very good at doing that.
Yeah.
So it's something that I try to strongly advocate.
Yeah, I do think it has improved in the last sort of like 5 to 6 years, though, man. And the other thing I've noticed, like when we first talked, if you open up the conversation, it's very rarely that it's shut down. Like, I can't think of a time that I've talked about like how tough life can be and running a business. People don't tend that's never happened to me, in actual fact, thinking about it. So I think, I think it has improved, men talking about it like we are now.
Yeah.
And secondly, anyone that's thinking about that, I've never experienced anyone shutting it down, and I've only experienced people that often open up themselves.
I agree entirely, and I think it was the fear that prevented me for a long time, and that takes various forms, including the fear of, well, what are people going to think of me? Am I going to look like I'm weak, for example? But actually, it's now recognizing that that's the true strength.
Yeah.
To be able to sort of stand up and speak about it, because you're not only speaking about it for yourself, you're speaking about it for other people as well, because other people might see that and then think, okay, well, it's safe for me to do so.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to recap those 2 points then, Chris, which is, so listen to yourself and your body. Don't ignore it, and talk. But it could be anyone. It could be anyone to start with. And I think So
Yeah,
if you talk to taxi drivers, they're often the people that people talk to, or someone, a stranger, aren't they? It's like, at
yeah,
least the first step is talk to someone.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, there are trained professionals out there
Yeah,
who are fantastic to talk to, and people who need to access that support, as I have done before. I would fully encourage that, but just talking rather than not talking is always going to be better.
yeah, love that, Chris. This is the an interesting segue because I'm going to ask it two right. Well, I'm actually going to ask you two ways round because of what we've just discussed. What makes you happy, and also what makes you unhappy? Because I suspect that sort of links into the question. So, I'm going to start on what makes you happy, Chris.
I think, as cliche as it might sound, it's spending time with my family.
Yeah,
As I've gotten older, my perception and understanding of happiness has changed a lot. I think when I was younger, I was always sort of telling myself, "Oh, I might be happy if I get that new car, or I'll be happy when I can get this sort of house, or if I achieve this in my career, or whatever it might be." But actually, where I derive my greatest joy now is from the simplest of moments. It's perhaps sharing a moment with my wife, or it's watching my children play together and laughing. It's
yeah,
just those kind of things.
yeah, yeah. I think, and what for our listeners, what Chris is describing, what we would call that is like the hedonic treadmill that many of us. I can't think of anyone that hasn't been on it, and I think I was sort of my wife was taking the mick out of me the other day because I was basically saying I've kind of learned that everything I needed to be happy I've always had.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
she was kind of like looking at me like, yeah, I've kind of been telling you this for like over 20 years. But it is that thing, isn't it? Like all the things that make you happy, you can't go and buy. They haven't been invented. They haven't been invented in the last 1,000 years. They are the human things like relationships and so on that we all need.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, coming back to my point about listening to what your body's telling you, my wife was telling me for at least a year I needed to slow down and do something different, and I was convinced that she was wrong. So sometimes it's about listening to what others are telling you as well.
Yeah, and yeah, shout out to your wife because not everyone does that. I know there'll be listeners here, Chris, who've been in the same situation, but the person they're with or their partner, I've heard this from people, is doing the opposite. They're pushing them because of sometimes it's financial constraints, sometimes it's what they are with that person for.
Yeah,
Uh, so I think just wanted to acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge your partner. So
yeah, no, definitely, she's my absolute rock.
Um, so what makes you unhappy? Like what are the things that because you said like you're listening to your body and you're quite aware. Like what makes you unhappy?
I suppose the most obvious one is if I don't listen, if I get into that awful trap of just working too much, eating the wrong foods, not looking after myself, not spending the time doing the things that I want to be doing, not engaging activities that bring me joy. That's it sort of like on a micro level. On a macro level, it can be something as benign as reading the news too much.
Yeah,
I go through periods where I'm almost obsessively looking at the news apps and things like that. And unfortunately, good news doesn't seem to sell.
yeah,
So you find yourself just bombarded with terrible story after terrible story. And it can lead you to thinking that the world is a hopeless place,
yeah,
and, and sort of not recognizing that there are so many wonderful things going on at the same time. So I now actually have to intentionally counteract that. I have a link saved as a favorite on my phone to a site that is only good news,
yeah,
which is something to fight against it.
yeah. I'll do you a swap, Chris. I've got it's a data subscription. It's free. It's a newsletter and it's a data of all the stuff in the world that is improving.
Amazing.
Again, most metrics, like things like even really serious things like child mortality rates are improving.
Yeah,
Um, uh, but when you read the news, you think everything is getting worse. But I'll send it to you because it's got everything that you can imagine and all these graphs going up. But if you read the news, you think all the graphs are going down.
yeah. I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? When we think about, for example, our fight and flight response, we are exposed to so many less dangers.
Yeah.
The world is so much safer than it was for our ancestors, but there's probably so much more triggering our fight and flight response.
Yeah. Also, I just want to make a confession to our leaders. I got in from watching Tottenham at 11 o'clock last night, and I was so tired that I started dipping chocolate chip cookies into hummus. How bad is that? Please try it and let me know what you think. Chris, when I asked you this question, I think there's some people who are going to have a right smile on their face because they're going to reword the question to, do they deserve to be or should they be? Because lawyers sometimes get a bad rap, don't they? But can lawyers be happy? Everyone's thinking, why is Matt asking Chris this question? But can lawyers be happy, Chris?
I mean, the answer is a resounding yes. I think you just need to be in it for the right reasons. If you're going into law thinking that it's going to emulate an episode of Suits, then I think you're going to be disappointed. I can obviously only speak for my own experiences, but I've certainly found that where I've adapted my working practices to fit with my personality and to fit with the things that bring me joy, that has made me a happier lawyer.
Yeah.
So there's definitely lots of things that can, if left unaddressed, make you an unhappy lawyer. It's a difficult job. It's a stressful job. People are coming to you most of the times looking to drop a problem into your lap and then looking to you to solve it. So
is that when you, because I don't work in the legal industry, many of the listeners won't. When you're talking about that, like consistent problems, is that colleagues or is that customers or is that both or another?
It varies depending on what area of law you practice, but so for me as an employment lawyer, I might have someone who is having a difficulty with a particular employee. It could be an employee who's having a difficulty at work. Previously, I was I was a family lawyer, so there it was people getting divorced, arguments about children. So I'm sure there are areas of law that it's not all problems, but a great part of being a lawyer is about being a problem solver.
Yeah.
And so inevitably what you're presented with are problems.
Yeah.
And
it's really interesting. Sorry, Chris.
I was just saying, you've got to work hard not to take those on.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Like, especially with a family one, that's what I was going to follow up with. Like, how, and I think there will be people listening that will resonate with stress at work that you may take on. You don't need to be in law or family law, but family law is like, right, that's got to be one of the hardest things. How do you not take that on? You must take some of it on. It must be impossible to not. But any tips, techniques, stuff you've learned?
Yeah, I think you definitely do take it on. One of the things that I found was that you can lean on your colleagues. There's such a camaraderie that exists within that field of work, I found. And that includes people who may actually be on the other side of your matter because they know exactly what you're going through. So certainly that.
Chris, what do you mean, as somebody in the legal industry, what do you mean by on the other side?
Sorry. So if you've got it's effectively your opponent.
Right.
The person who's representing the other party to your case.
Got it.
And you might be at complete odds as to what you're trying to achieve. But I guess not everyone takes this on board. You can do your job nicely. You can be calm. You can be measured. You can be polite. You don't have to be tearing strips off the other side just because they happen to be representing the other side.
Yeah, I mean that applies to all parts of life, doesn't it? Like even you think in the world in traditional business, sometimes your main competitors are the people that are going to understand the strains and stresses that you're going more than anyone else. And I think I've heard footballers talk about a lost ritual, which is the football managers used to always have a glass of wine after the match together, and it's kind of like moved on with time and things like that. And I don't understand with media duties and stuff like that, but you can imagine that you've just finished, but that is the only other person who really understands what you're going through.
Exactly. It is a sense of empathy being lost, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Chris, you talked about when we had the pre-call quite a bit about working in the sort of broad legal industry. There's definitely situations of snobbery and elitism in law in your experience. Can you talk us through what you've experienced, what you mean by it, and how we can, because again, I don't think it's just law. I'm sure law is one of many. So I think we can take lessons from this. Like, so what have you experienced? And please take us through it.
So for me, again, it's only my personal experience, but I am not a solicitor. So although I'm a qualified lawyer, my qualification is as a chartered legal executive. So still a qualified lawyer, a different route of qualification. That was in large part because I didn't feel I could afford or manage to go to university. I came from a very normal background, state school. Mum and dad didn't have a lot of money. So back then, the cost was just a bit high, given the sort of the cushion rate that existed with regards to getting training contracts and things like that. So I've been in law for 20 years now, and I'm very, very pleased to say it has come on an awful lot. And especially so within the firm that I work in, because they've worked really, really hard to make sure that they have developed and embedded a culture that works for the staff. But I've certainly had it where I've been treated almost like a second-class citizen because I haven't gone through that traditional qualification route. Now, I must say I've had people that have been exactly the other way. I've had judges make lovely comments about when I've clarified to them, now I'm not a solicitor, I'm a chartered legal executive. So it's not across the board, but there's definitely been, I've certainly had plenty of experiences where I've felt as though I've been treated differently and negatively in comparison to my solicitor peers.
Yeah. And this sort of leads into the main question that we've got, sort of the subject, which is, we've just touched on a little bit of what it's like around peers and colleagues and so on, but I see this through the happiness index lens, and this is definitely not, because there are law firms, and I'll put accountancy firms in there as well, that do treat their employees really well.
Definitely.
But there is definitely, it feels like when you meet a lot of law firms, they are quite far behind when it comes to looking after their people. Why do you think that is? And also, do you see the same? Do you think that's the case, or I mean, you might want to dispute that?
No, it definitely still exists. There's definitely room for improvement within the sector. We've still got a long way to go. It's getting a lot better. One of the things that I'm really happy with is the arrival of apprenticeships within law, because that's just breeding so much more diversity in the field, which can only be a good thing.
How new are apprenticeships in the?
So, in terms of our firm, we've been doing them for a few years now.
Yeah.
There might be firms that have been doing it for longer, but in terms of my first-hand experience of it, it's a few years. And so it's a real it's not dissimilar to how I qualified, in the sense that I would study in the evening and I would work in a firm in the daytime, but it's much more structured than how it was, in the sense that your employment is directly linked to your studies. So, I mean, we have an apprentice working in our team at the moment. She's amazing. And it's just lovely to see that door has been opened slightly wider. I think sometimes where law firms can be let down is that the idea that someone is an amazing lawyer, so let's make them a manager of people, is slightly flawed.
Absolutely. I've made that mistake.
It's not necessarily their skill set. And the other thing that I've seen sometimes is that I think there can be a risk that if someone has had a really hard time when they've been training, and then they go on to be a trainer, for some reason they then give their trainees a hard time, almost as though I had to pay my dues, so now you're going to pay your dues, when actually the way that it should be, and the way that I would advocate, is you should flip that on its head and say, your training's not going to be like mine. You're going to have a better experience.
That, I've seen that crop up so many times. Like, even I was at an event and someone was delivering a keynote, and they said that they felt themselves going through the same process of trying to, like, well, it wasn't like it was, so you should go through what I've been through. And I've even seen it in the football team that I coached, the girls team, that they basically had to wait at least 2 years to get certain things like the kit and stuff, because we were funding and all this kind of stuff. But the next group that came along, they got that automatically because we were handing it down.
Yeah.
And some of the girls were coming together, that's not fair. We had to, and I'm like,
yeah,
because they had carved the way for the next group, but they were saying this is not fair. And I thought back to that talk, and then when you said that, it must be something in human beings, mustn't it? Because this isn't just in the law industry.
No, not at all. It almost does feel like you have to make yourself feel better by making someone else feel worse. Yeah. It's a bizarre set of circumstances, and thankfully one that I don't tend to see firsthand, and one where I would happily call it out if I was seeing it.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think the thing, call it out, as you say, and I think I'd say from that perspective is call it out on yourself as well, because all these things, they're all they can all sit within us and come out at the time we're not. We had a speaker at one of our events, Chris she did a great start. She said, put your hand up if you think you're a nice person, and everyone in the audience put their hand up. And I just thought it was just fascinating, isn't it? Because I always think of all of these emotions, because we study them all the time. We can't pretend that we're immune to it, and all of us, every listener, me, you, we could be at that point where that thought could come in our head, and it's how we call ourselves out on it.
Definitely.
Chris, you're very passionate about mental health and the workplace. Like, why? Obviously, we've heard about your personal experience, but why? You could help yourself and move forward. Why are you passionate about helping in the workplace?
I think because what I would like to be is the voice that I would have benefited from when I was going through some of my earlier things.
Yeah.
I remember I went many years before I would go to the doctor because I was worried about it being on my medical records that I had some mental health challenges. I remember I would say nothing about it at work, and I was very, very good at masking. So no one would have any idea that anything was wrong, but actually I was absolutely breaking. And to be quite frank, perhaps some of this was to do with the time and already having had some less than ideal treatment in terms of my qualification. But I worried that it would somehow mark my cards, that there was all of a sudden a ceiling that I would bang up against because, well, he's got this, and therefore he's not fit to carry on working through. So I think some of the proudest things that I've been able to do is actually speak out. So I was privileged to give a short talk for our associates a little while back. So associate sits below the qualification of partner. So naturally, lots and lots of our associates, not all of them, are going to be thinking about, well, I want to become a partner. That's my next stepping stone.
Yeah.
And it was really nice for me to be able to speak out and say, I've struggled with my mental health. I still face challenges with my mental health, and I've become a partner. They're not diametrically opposed. You can still achieve what you want to achieve, whatever that is.
I love that. Have you ever found someone reach out to you after you've done that?
I don't remember a time where I haven't had someone reach out. If I've done a talk, if I put a quote in an article or something like that, there is always at least one person that reaches out and just says, thank you, I thought I was alone on this, or thank you, I realize now that I don't have this limitation that I thought I might have. And and I mean, that personally, that's good for my own recovery.
Yeah. And it's like anything, isn't it? Like we've kind of both done it on here, but like if you take, say, for example, Parenting Out Loud, which I think is a campaign that's talk about, like, it's not easy, it is tough, blah blah blah. Like anytime that I'll talk about like the challenges of balancing work and the kids at in my own company, people come and go, oh god, thank at least I know there's someone who'll understand. And I guess that's what people are coming there. Is it a sense of relief that they're coming to you with? Is it they feel heard?
Yeah.
What?
No, I think that probably is the best description for it.
Yeah. And have you had any downsides of talking about it? Because your fear was, if you talked about it, like maybe people are putting you on some kind of list or saying that you're not, I think your words were fit to do the role. Have you had any downsides to it?
No, I can't think of any, thankfully.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get slightly nervous every time I do speak about it. So there's still somewhere up there. There's that little niggle. But it's again just sort of pushing through that and continuing to talk about it. And I'm lucky enough, I sit on the board of Cornwall Mind, and several board members have got lived experience, and they've got professional experience in helping people with mental health challenges. And so I'm sort of surrounded by great voices and encouragement. So it's really good.
Yeah, and I do ask because I do think the fear is founded in some reality as well, because there are people out there that still, I think Nigel Farage has been saying things like about mental health and all these kinds of things. And I know for a fact I was helping support someone start a business that was helping in the mental health space, and she openly talked about her mental health challenges. And one of the people she was pitching to said, "Are you the right person to be running this business if you have mental health challenges?" Which I thought made that person seem even more of a, we can say, moron. There's one side of it, but I also thought you're just technically inaccurate, because who better to run this organization? So
yeah,
one, you're a moron, but two, like I couldn't get my head around the logic of it. Like,
no, it's baffling, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think it's just interesting to hear, and it's brilliant that you've had the positive bits. But again, I think it's, and also validating, I think people are fearful sometimes to speak out, which makes it even more important. Yeah, you see what you're doing, Chris. So we just thank you on behalf of everyone. Chris, just another question that we talked about, and this is about the legal industry, but also across lots of spaces. I was really lucky to meet Amy Edmondson, who's the person who coined psychological safety at an event recently. And you said she was talking about psychological safety for about 12 years before anyone even gave a damn. Now psychological safety is spoken about so much, people don't even know that it was her that had coined it. Like, so we're talking, like, I think 30 years on from when it was, probably even more than that. It was probably 35 years since she first started talking about it. But the question I've got for you is, how do we speed up progress on the people agenda? Because even something like a really important thing like psychological safety took 30 years just to get it into like the consciousness of business.
Yeah.
How do we speed it up?
Such a difficult question. I think it is about continuing to talk. I think it needs to get out there more that there are real benefits around this. I mean, businesses are so pressured at the moment in so many different ways, and understandably, therefore, that idea about return on investment becomes front and center. They're not wanting to do anything that's not going to give a decent return on investment. And I think sometimes aspects like that and investing in the staff, they might feel either too long term in terms of, yes, it's going to give a return, but it's too far in the future, or alternatively, they may not even see that there is going to be a decent enough return on it. And I think that's the place to start, because I remember looking at a study or reading about a study, and they were talking about how it was the psychological safety that drove an increased level of reporting of mistakes. So that was in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
Now that can only be a good thing, If things are going wrong and they're being swept under the carpet, you're not gonna find out about them early enough. So they're going to be a much bigger problem for you to deal with.
Yeah.
And people are going to be unhappy because everyone's walking on eggshells. Whereas the team that is well used to working with one another, supportive of one another, they will come up and say, well, actually, no, this is wrong. And that's where you can fix the problem.
I'm cringing because this happened yesterday to me, and the listeners are going to think this guy is so incompetent, but I accidentally took down our own website. I think it was yesterday, because the original Happiness Index website everything was in my name. It was in my account. So there was part of it that hadn't transitioned into the corporate account, and finance asked me to go and get something out of there and send it to them so they could do it. And whilst I was there, I noticed something that was broken. And many years ago, that is a world that I understood and knew how to do something. So whilst I was there in the account, I fixed it. But it was a massive unexpected consequence. But it basically broke a load of other stuff. And our CTO called me, panicking, blah, blah, blah. And then I just confessed that I said, it's me, I've broken it. And so then he was like relief. He immediately fixed it.
Yeah.
And what we were basically joking about is, if I was scared of him and I had lied, it would have taken at least a day to troubleshoot where it is. That he was relieved that I told him, because as soon as he knew, he could just go to that exact point. And obviously I'm privileged. I'm working my own company.
Yes.
And I have high levels of psychological safety. But we were talking about that exact same example. Like, if I was scared of the CTO, I probably would have said, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got to be, it's driven from the top, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we see awful examples in law where someone makes a mistake, and the mistake is one thing, but the steps they take to try and cover that up are then career ending, because that then involves elements of dishonesty and things like that. So and you see it with really junior people, and you can tell it's most likely, almost certainly done out of a place of fear, out of a place of concern of what's going to happen to me if they, if this comes to light that I've made this mistake. Yeah. And actually it's the opposite of what any business needs. You need that person to stick their hand up and say, I've done something wrong, and you need that no blame culture to give them the safety to do so.
Yeah, I think a lot of like thriller movies and things like that, they start with that, don't they? Like an innocent person who might accidentally drive into someone on a dark road at night.
Yeah.
And then it's all the things that they do after that, where you watch it thinking, oh my God, this could be me. Like, what has happened? And it's that you can just imagine it, can't you, happening in a corporate environment, especially in legal.
Definitely. I mean, I remember worrying over weekends about typos that I might have made many years ago. You do, if you're that way inclined, catastrophize as to what the outcome might be. But it's always better to front up and deal with it. And quite frankly, if you do front up, and whatever organization you're working in, they absolutely ball you out and they treat you horrendously, well, there you've got it. They're not the organization for you to work for.
Absolutely. I think I'm thinking about like mistake amnesties now. Maybe companies should start, right, just to let you know, if there's anything in the cupboard that you've done over the last 10 years, come and tell us now, because there could, even if you think of biggest things that end up breaking companies down, or biggest like financial issues, legal issues, they may have sat there for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And people are scared to open that cupboard, aren't they? But what you're saying is just get it out quickly, and you can move forward. But it has to be built on psychological safety.
Definitely.
Last question. Can't believe time is flowing. And this is like a leading question, because I remember when we had the pre-call, but it just says work-life balance ... Hiscubs ... Chris, over to you.
Well, Matt, I was hoping you might have the answer, because it's something that I continue to struggle with, and it's something that I have to I have to continue adjusting, right? When I recognize that I've got the balance wrong. I mean, work-life balance is itself under attack by the fact that the name is now coined as work-life blend,
Yeah.
and it's become so much more difficult in my experience post-COVID, because you're so online now. Everyone's gotten used to an element of working from home, which I completely support. I do hybrid working. My firm supports hybrid working, and it's amazing. But that temptation to, oh, I'll just check that email, notwithstanding the fact I'm on holiday or what it might be. So for me personally, it's a huge discipline to try and achieve work-life balance. I don't achieve it more often than I do.
Yeah.
I think where I now recognize is that if I don't put myself front and center in terms of making sure there is a decent balance, that's where I end up going under the sort of mental health bus. So there's an extra element for me personally that I've got to look after myself.
Yeah.
And that's a good driver. And then also you want to be the best partner that you can be. You want to be the best parent that you can be, the friend or whatever. So I think sometimes it can be helpful to take yourself out of the equation and think, actually, I need to do this for someone else. Yeah. So we talked when we were just catching up at the beginning of this, we spoke about how, this weekend my wife and I are going to have a date night, and again, that would be something that would be so easy to pass by. Yet it's just making sure that you do force yourself or encourage yourself to prioritize those things that are going to bring you joy.
Yeah, 100%. I think the bits that I would add to that, Chris, is for me, I've had to add in like barriers. And I also think it depends on people's personality. But I'm quite like anything I'm doing, I'm all in on, which is really good in some respects, but really bad when it comes to this potential subject.
Yeah.
Is I will become obsessed with whatever I'm working on. So I have to have physical barriers. This is the same with me with things like chocolate and stuff like that as well. Like I have to hide stuff.
Yes, I would second that.
And I know some people, like I'm married to one. Oh yeah, no, their Easter egg is still over there somewhere. Like no, shut. I don't understand who these aliens are.
No.
But we're all different. I have to put barriers in. That's why, for example, I won't take my phone on holiday with me. I take the apps off my phone at Friday night. The other thing that I have is rituals, which is just even little things that probably like. I mean, you probably do wear a suit, Chris, but I'm not wearing like traditional work clothes, so my work clothes are similar to my weekend clothes. But I have different clothes that I will switch out of and have a shower. It's like a ritual. Yeah. I'll put my laptop away. But I think going back to your original point, I think is the most powerful one. Like, it's thinking about the other people, because I literally think in my head it's Mark Zuckerberg it's me versus Mark Zuckerberg for my children. And all these tech companies have got billions and billions and billions of pounds worth of investment in understanding what makes this brain tick and your body tick.
Absolutely.
Your kid is just there wanting a bit of attention, but for whatever reason you think, I'll show the listeners that I have my notes under here now by doing this. But it's in everyone's head, isn't it? Like you're thinking, oh, I need to check it. I need to check it. I need to check it. Yeah. Everyone listens to this podcast thinking, I need to check that email. And we have to, unless we can do what you said, which I think is the most powerful one, is putting yourself in the shoes of the others, which I think is a really great bit of insight from you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's so pervasive, isn't it? I know that I get that sort of phantom vibrate where I think I've just got a text message and my phone hasn't received anything, but my body is sensing that something's gone up. It's so it's so ingrained. And you're absolutely right. There are billions and billions of pounds being spent by various companies. Food industry is perhaps another one, to get us to act in a certain way, and therefore it's incredibly difficult to go against the flow of that. But I'm reminded of an article I read once, which talked about interviewing people that provided palliative care, and about how the regrets that people had, or the final thoughts that people had before they died, and no one was saying, I wish I worked more. And it sounds so obvious when you say it. I mean, no one would say that, but yet we still put ourselves under such pressure to achieve these things for other people. But maybe we can sort of throw in some more positive ones for ourselves and our families along the way.
And that's even just on a final point on that. That's why, again, I think you gave a different version of work-life balance. What was the one that you said that some people call it work-life
blend?
I've also heard a couple that I prefer, which is integration and harmony. Harmony is the one I particularly like because my work actually makes me happier. Like I enjoy what I do, and ironically, I'm researching happiness, so I apply the stuff, which is obviously not going to be the same for everyone. However, work is a huge part of people's happiness. It's a huge part of people's life. But those examples are where it gets totally out of sync, because you see the reverse, where what happens when people don't have a job that's fulfilling, they don't have a purpose. So I think the work-life balance bit is, people mess around with the words of it, but I think that's what people are talking about, that end of life bit, which is it's got out of balance and they haven't made time, and maybe they didn't spend time with their grandchildren or they didn't spend time with their own children. That for me is the big lesson from it. It's like, how do you integrate the whole thing to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just find, it's different for everyone. Find what it is that gives you joy and make, have more of that in your life, whatever that thing is.
Chris, one last question that I'm going to sneak in here. If you went in a time machine and met 16-year-old Chris Morse, what would you say to them?
Life is long, hopefully.
Yeah.
Enjoy the journey. Stop worrying about the destination.
Yeah. I think we're going to tattoo that last bit. Stop worrying about the destination in my head, because I'm sure you're still doing it. That you're saying I'm doing it all the time, and every listener's doing it as well. So I'm going to leave that as your final message, Chris, that we all need to stop worrying about the destination. And thank you for being so open. I think you've definitely empowered other people to share their stories, Chris.
Great. I hope it has an impact. But thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Chris.